showdown may be coming between our future president and the Republican-led Congress. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, along with House Speaker Paul Ryan, are calling for investigations into potential Russian meddling in the elections. And they both said Trump's promised tax cuts may be too deep and need to be revenue neutral.
My preference on tax reform is that it be revenue neutral. On the infrastructure issue, it'll be interesting to see how this is put together. But I hope we will clearly avoid, and I'm confident we will, is a $1 trillion stimulus. So we need to do this carefully.
All right, joining me right now is Trump economic advisor Steve Moore, also Steve Hayes, the editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard. Congratulations on that new job there, Steve. I'll start with Steve Moore here. What are McConnell and Ryan, in your view, missing? You are someone who has been a big proponent of tax cuts. They want it to be revenue neutral. What's it really going to look like in the end?
Well, Trish, it's not just that I want a tax cut. It's Donald Trump wants a tax cut. That's what he campaigned for. He campaigned saying, I'm going to give the American people a tax cut. So if it's revenue neutral, it's not a tax cut. One person gets a tax cut, another person gets a tax increase. Now, I happen to think, Trish, that if we did, this economic plan with this tax cut, I think you're going to get a lot of revenue from businesses that are going to come into the government, to the country. I think you're going to get a lot more people into the workforce, a lot more jobs in this country, which generates revenues. But I've never liked the idea of a revenue neutral tax plan. I think we ought to cut taxes because Americans are paying too much, and Donald Trump has said that many times to me as well.
Stephen Hayes, the thinking on that from the economist viewpoint is that you can grow overall GDP via these tax cuts. It may not be revenue neutral at the start, but the whole idea is to bring in more tax revenue by growth, as opposed to penalizing people, saying, okay, you made that much, now you're going to pay the government more. It's interesting in some ways, and this is JFK, right? JFK cut taxes. Back in those days, it was the conservatives who were saying, no, 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 you got to watch spending. Is McConnell clinging to an old school of thought at a time when we need to do more to generate growth?
Well, let me just say how refreshing it is to be talking about how deep tax cuts are going to be after the last 8 years.
Here.
No, look, I think Steve makes a good argument, and as somebody who's been sort of an eager tax cutter, somebody who almost never met a tax cut I didn't like, I think he's right. That said, I do think it's important when you're talking about debt and deficits to be mindful of what we're seeing on the other side. Now, I would want to solve that problem by looking at serious entitlement reforms, which everybody knows are driving the debt. Paul Ryan, of course, has sort of pioneered a new approach to entitlements. Donald Trump has made clear that he's not much interested in reforming entitlements.
He really insisted on the campaign trail that he wasn't going to near that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one idea. Do you think Mitch McConnell will push for that as well? And what kind of opposition is he going to be met with, Steve Moore, given that Donald Trump said, look, we're not going to go near those things? Save that for another day.
Trump really did say, I'm not going to touch Social Security and Medicare. Now, he didn't say we're not going to deal with the fraud, because there's massive amounts of fraud in both of these programs in terms of erroneous payments to people who shouldn't be getting them, and we should clean that up. About $150 billion a year of erroneous payments. But, look, I'm a big believer that the President should do what he told the American people he would do. And what he said consistently to the American people, he's told me this many times, the top priority right now is growth, getting the economy moving, getting people back into jobs. And once you get that, Trish, you solve a lot of problems with growth. You bring the deficit down, you get the debt down, you get people into jobs, you reduce poverty, and then I think you could have a serious discussion about entitlements. But, I say to my friend Steve, just saying one quick thing. Steve Hayes, you and I agree a lot. The problem with the entitlements is tell me one Democrat in Congress that wants to deal with entitlements seriously. Right. I can't think of one.
Yeah, no, there's not a whole lot of political will there on either side. But Stephen Hayes, what happens to Mitch McConnell if he continues to really throw this kind of opposition up about tax cuts, given, as Steve points out, this is what Donald Trump won on. This was part of the platform.
Well, look, I think that's one of the reasons that Donald Trump is going to have good relations with Congress, with Republicans in Congress. He's going to have to make that case to Mitch McConnell, make exactly the argument that Steve is suggesting he make, which is I ran on this, I won on this, this is what we ought to do, and these are my priorities. He's the President of the United States. He's shown an ability to make his case directly to the American people and to bring people along behind him. I think he ought to do that. I do think it would be a big mistake. I mean, Steve is right on the fraud, on the entitlement question, but the real problem, of course, is structural, and we need to be serious about addressing the structural problems with entitlements. You know, I would certainly be open to sequencing it any way, just as long as we eventually have the entitlement discussion that we all know we need to have.
All right. Well, it's so good to see both you guys. And Stephen Hayes, congratulations, the new editor-in-chief at the Weekly Standard, taking over for Bill Kristol. Really exciting stuff. All right.